Hello guys, without much ado, I just want to start with today's discussion. You know how important special contracts is in your exam. And in this video, we are going to cover up the whole of the special contracts in less than 60 minutes. Stay tuned, we are going to discuss everything that is there for special contracts. Generally in the exams, you do get two questions at least from these topics. So, starting with special contracts, there are 7 types of special contracts: contingent contract, quasi-contract, indemnity, guarantee, bailment, pledge, and agency. Starting with contingent contract, the word contingent itself means may or may not. So it's a contract which may or may not be performed depending on an event which may or may not happen. So let's say A says to B, I will sell you my house if I inherit it from my father. So contract is that A will sell his house to B, but it depends on what? On the contract that if he inherits it from his father. On this event, if he inherits. If he inherits, he will sell. If he does not inherit, he will not sell. So this is what we mean by a contingent contract. Always remember, a contingent contract is a valid contract. Now, when we talk about contingent contract, it is a contract to do or not to do something on the happening or not happening of some event which is collateral. So what are the essentials? It's dependent on a future event. The event must be a collateral event. When I say event must be a collateral event, that is, it should not form a part of the reciprocal promise. What it means is, if A says to B, I will give you 1 lakh if you marry C. The contract is A is going to give B money. But when B marries, so this event marriage is coming from the other party. And when the event is coming from the other party, it is reciprocal. And if it is reciprocal, it is not contingent. But if A says to B that I will give you rupees 1 lakh if I am able to marry C, the contract depends on A's marriage. So A will give money to B if A is able to marry. Now this event marriage, it's not coming from the other party. So it is not a part of the contract. It's a collateral event. It's a subordinate event. And when the event is a collateral event, then it becomes a contingent contract. And obviously the event, here it should be the contract shall not depend on the will of the promiser. That means what? This means that please deliver the goods to me. If I feel like I'll pay you. My feelings can never be contingent. It can be an uncertain event. It can depend on a third party, but it can never depend on the parties to the contract. Now, what are the rules regarding contingent contract? First and foremost, it can depend on the happening of an event. So A says to B, I will sell you my house if I inherit it from my father. If he inherits, he has to sell. If he does not inherit, he does not have to sell. On the other hand, if he says, I will sell you my land if I inherit it from my father within 6 months. If he inherits within 4 months, he has to sell. If he inherits after 8 months, he does not have to sell. The next one, dependent on the non-happening of an event. A says to B, I will give you rupees 100 if the ship does not come to the port. Now, if the ship comes, I don't have to give you the money. If the ship does not come, I will have to give you the money. Can it depend on a third party? Yes, like if A is able to marry C. Now, this event is totally dependent on C. If C marries A, contract is valid. But if C goes and marries someone else, the contract is void. And it is dependent upon an impossible event. So impossible event, let's say I will get you a star from the sky. I'll stop a train by my hand. Impossible event. Only I just saw Balaya. He can do everything. But we cannot. So if I try to stop the train with my hands, it's an impossible event. So it is always void ab initio. So when I talk about contingent contract, it's valid. But when I talk about contingent contract dependent on impossible event, it is void ab initio. The next one is quasi-contract. This is a contract which is, actually there is no contract, but a contract is created by law, by the imposition of law. For example, A has to deliver goods to B. By mistake, the goods are delivered to C. So as between A and C, there is no contract, but there is a quasi-contract according to which C will return the goods back to A, or if he has used the goods, he will pay a reasonable price of goods to A. This is a quasi-contract. What are the features of a quasi-contract? First and foremost, it's imposed by law and an obligation is created without any contract. Always remember, let's say my goods were by mistake delivered to C. Can I go and claim the goods from D, E, F, G, H? No. I can only claim the goods from C and no one else. That means what? That means this right is available only against a person and not the world at large. Now, what are the different? We have 5 types of quasi-contract. The first we have already discussed. Goods delivered by mistake or under coercion, we have already discussed. Claim for necessaries supplied. So let us say you have supplied necessaries to a minor or to a lunatic or to a lunatic's family. As between you and a minor or you and a lunatic, there is no contract because they don't have contractual capacity. But there is a quasi-contract according to which you will be reimbursed from their property. Now, when I talk about lunatic's family, please remember family means dependent family who are dependent on the lunatic. The next one, obligations of a person enjoying benefits of a non-gratuitous right to recover money paid on behalf of another. Let us say A sold his land to B on which the government taxes are due. And if you fail to pay the government taxes, the government will take your land. So to protect his land, B pays off the government. Who was supposed to pay A? Who pays B? Can he recover it back from A? Yes, on the grounds of quasi-contract. Then the next one, obligations of a person enjoying benefits of a non-gratuitous act. That means what? I have done an act not with a motive to be paid for it. Let us say you have parked your car and someone comes and starts cleaning your car. You see that person cleaning, but you don't stop. Since you don't stop, you have accepted him to do the work and he's not doing it free of cost. Can you claim the charges? Yes. Then responsibility of finder of the goods. This is given in bailment in details. We'll do it there. So with this, we are done with quasi-contract. Moving forward, contract of indemnity. What do I mean by contract of indemnity? The word indemnity means to make good. Here, to make good the loss. Here means what? To make good the loss. Now, which loss am I talking about? I am talking about that loss which is caused due to the party making the promise or due to a third party. Right? Due to the party making the promise or due to the third party. Let's say I say, because of me, if you suffer any damage, I'll compensate you. I find a mobile, you claim it is yours. I'm giving you, I'm scared. If someone claims, you say, don't worry, ma'am. If someone comes and claims this mobile from you tomorrow, I'll pay you whatever damages you suffer. So this is indemnity. You are making the promise. You are the indemnifier. You have made the promise to me that you will make good my loss. So I'm the indemnified or the indemnity holder. Now, what are the rights of the indemnified or indemnity holder? Let's say tomorrow someone comes and claims that mobile from me. And because of that, they file a case against me. So whatever cost of the case was there, I can recover that from you. The court proves that this mobile belongs to you. So I might suffer damages, so I can recover those damages also from you. I mean, when they prove that the phone belonged to someone else, they would ask me to compensate that compensation. Let's say instead of going to the court, we settle outside the court. So in that case, whatever compromise is paid, whatever sum is paid as a compromise, I can recover that also. Now, when will the liability of the indemnifier start? As soon as the liability of the indemnified starts, will start the liability of the indemnifier also. Now, moving forward, contract of guarantee. What exactly is a contract of guarantee? Contract of guarantee is basically an assurance. What assurance? That if your debtor does not pay or if the other party does not perform, I will perform on their behalf. That is, I will pay on their behalf or perform on their behalf. The person, let's say D has taken a loan from C and for which S has given a guarantee. That means if D does not pay, who will pay? S will pay. Now we have 3 parties here. The debtor for whom the promise is made, the creditor to whom the promise is made, surety on who makes the promise. Now, what are the features of a contract of guarantee? First and foremost, it's a tripartite contract. That means it's a three-party contract. Three parties are involved: surety, debtor, and creditor. Here, there is already a liability. There is already a liability when the guarantee is given. The loan is already taken or the contract is already made, and I am giving a guarantee on their behalf. Now, if you will see, the surety is not getting any consideration. So, what is the consideration to the surety? Whatever consideration is given to the debtor acts as a consideration to the surety. So, basically, the surety does not really get any consideration personally, but whatever consideration is given to the debtor is consideration for the surety. Then, if any guarantee is obtained by misrepresentation, that is, they don't tell the surety all the material facts, such a guarantee itself will be void. Or if the guarantee is obtained by hiding material facts, there are facts which should be disclosed, and without disclosing those facts, you get a guarantee. Then also the guarantee shall be void. Now, if there are co-sureties, and I have given a guarantee that I will be liable only when some other person also signs the document, then in that case, if that other person does not sign, I am not liable. So let's say that this happens in case of co-sureties. Let us say S1, S2 and S3 are co-sureties, where S1 has signed with the condition that I am liable only when S2 and S3 joins. So if any one or both of them, they don't sign, S1 will also not be liable. So see here, when a person gives a guarantee on the condition that creditor will not act upon it unless other person joins in the guarantee, it is not valid unless the other persons join in. Now, there are two types of guarantee: specific and continuing guarantee. Specific guarantee is for a single transaction and cannot be revoked, whereas continuing guarantee moves over a series of transactions and can be revoked by giving a notice. Can be revoked by giving a notice, but the revocation is only with respect to future transactions. That means, let us say here the guarantee was given, here it was revoked. So for this I am liable, but for this I am not liable. So let us say the guarantee is given for 1 year. This is not specific, it's continuing, it's moving over a series of transactions, it's just time specific. Or let's say the guarantee was given for 10 lakh, that is also continuing. It's just amount specific. Now, when is the surety discharged? Discharge means the surety is not liable anymore. First and foremost, by revocation, notice of revocation. Please understand, specific guarantee cannot be revoked. Continuing guarantee will be revoked with respect to future transactions. By death of surety, again, same thing. Specific guarantee cannot be revoked. Continuing will be revoked with respect to future transactions. What about the transactions already made, or what about specific guarantee? The legal heirs will be liable, but not personally up to the extent of assets inherited. And what is this by novation? So let's say D has taken a loan from C for which S has given a guarantee. But S steps out of the contract and A steps in place of S. This is by novation. The old contract is cancelled and a new contract is made. Then the next one, by conduct of the creditor, variation in the terms of the contract between the principal debtor and the creditor and the surety is not informed. So there are terms in the contract and you change these terms. Let's say, for example, interest was at the rate of 10%. From 10%, you make it to 6%, right? The loan was taken here. After 1 year, from 10%, you make it 6%. Till here, I was liable. From this day, I am not liable. So the liability comes to an end from the date of variation. 1 minute. Only if the surety is not informed. If you've already informed the surety, then he will be liable, obviously. When the creditor discharges the principal debtor, the surety is also discharged. Now, please understand, why am I liable? Because the principal debtor is liable. If the principal debtor's liability comes to an end, obviously my liability will also come to an end. For example, let us say A says to B, please build me a house, right? And for which S has given a guarantee. Right, that if B does not build, S will build the house. So S is the surety, B is the debtor and A is the creditor. But A had a condition, you build the house, but materials only I will supply. So who's going to supply the materials? A is going to supply the materials. Now A did not supply. So this is a reciprocal promise. Unless A supplies, B cannot construct. So A did not supply, so B did not construct. And obviously because B did not construct, A was like S. And now why did B did not construct? Because A did not supply the material. Now A goes to S and says, see, I told you he will not do the work. Now please pay me. I mean, you finish the work. Is S liable to finish? No. By not supplying the material, A only discharged B. B is discharged, obviously S is discharged. The next one, creditor makes a composition. Makes the composition, that means what? The amount was 10 lakh. He says, okay, pay only 5 lakh. That's a composition. Gives time. The payment was supposed to be made after 1 year. He says, okay, pay after 2 years. Or agrees not to sue the principal debtor. Tells the principal debtor, whatever happens, I'll not sue you. They should inform the surety. If the surety is not informed, is discharged. Here, please remember it's a complete discharge because it's not variation in the terms. Variation in the terms means the terms of the loan or whatever. Here it's a complete discharge. One thing here, let us say D has taken a loan from C for which S has given a guarantee. And A goes and tells C, please don't sue D. And C agrees. Is S discharged? No. Because he did not agree with the principal debtor. Agrees not to sue the principal debtor. So this contract is between the creditor and the principal debtor. Okay. But here he is agreeing with the third party. So S will continue to be liable. Creditor impairs the surety's right over the principal debtor. So let us say when the loan was given, so D gave a loan to C. Okay. D gave a loan to C. I'll just reverse it. C gave a loan to D, 10 lakh. D also gave a jewelry of 8 lakh. And S has given a guarantee. Now, when S pays off C, can we say S will have a right over this jewelry? Yes. What C does is, C returns the jewelry to D. So, when C returns the jewelry to D, C has taken away S's right over D. So S will be discharged. Full discharge or to 8 lakh? To 8 lakh. So creditor impairs. Impairs means hampers. Hampers means affects. Affects negatively. That is, takes away the rights of the surety over the principal debtor. Okay? Guarantee obtained by misrepresentation. So all the three we have already discussed. S has given a guarantee, but C did not disclose some facts, or C misrepresented S, or C misrepresented D, whatever. In all misrepresentation, please remember, can be intentional, that is fraud, or it can also be unintentional. Okay? Or where creditor shall not act so unless a co-surety. So if co-surety does not sign, the person who has signed will also not be liable. Now, what are the rights of the surety? First and foremost, against the principal debtor. Rights of subrogation, rights of indemnification. Simple. D has taken a loan from C for which S has given a guarantee. Let's say S pays off C. So C is out of the picture. But can I say now step S becomes the creditor to D? Yes. So he steps into the shoes of the creditor. Okay guys, don't be like, oh yeah, steps into the shoes of the creditor. He tells the creditor, open your shoes, I will. No. Steps into the shoes of the creditor. That means what? That means all the rights of the creditor will now pass on to him. Second, can he recover the money now from D? Yes, this is known as indemnification. Now, what are the rights against the creditor? First and foremost, right of security. First and foremost, right of security. So, let us say, in this case, okay, the jewelry was given. Let us say D had taken a loan from C, 10 lakh, gave a jewelry of 8 lakh. Can I say when S pays on the due date, he can recover this jewelry of 8 lakh? Yes. This is right to security. Let us say, even if, I repeat again, let us say, even if S is unaware of the security, can he still recover it? Yes. See, even if he was unaware of it, and if C loses this jewelry or parts away with the jewelry, the surety is discharged to the extent of the value of the security. Right? Then next is right to set off. What is this right? What is this right? Let's understand. Let's say D has taken a loan of 10 lakh from C and S has given a guarantee. Okay? That means, can I say if D doesn't pay, S will pay 10 lakh to C? Yes. So S has to pay 10 lakh to C. Now, under a separate contract, C has to pay 2 lakh to S. Under a separate contract, C has to pay 2 lakh to S. Can S, on the due date when S has to pay, can S set off 10 lakh against में this 2 lakh and pay only 8 lakh to the creditor? Yes. Yes. But this 2 lakh he is supposed to receive from C, so he can set off and pay only 8 lakh. But obviously, how much can he recover from D? 10 lakh, because he has set off he has paid off 10 lakh rupees, right? So, if the creditor owes any amount of money to the surety, while making the payment, the surety can set off that amount. And the last one, right to reduction. What it means is, let's say D has now, this is a separate case, the red one is a separate case. D has now become insolvent and he will only pay 60%. Right? So he will only pay 6 lakhs. Can S also get that reduction and pay only 6 lakhs? Yes. Right to reduction. Claim has a right to claim proportionate reduction in his liability if the principal debtor becomes insolvent. The next one, right against co-sureties. We have two things here. First and foremost, let us say D has taken a loan of 10 lakh from C. S1 and S2 has given the guarantee, nothing discussed as to the amount. Each of them is liable for 5 lakh. Okay? The surety is liable to contribute equally for the discharge of the debts. But let us say it's agreed that they will share it in the ratio of 3:2. Then in that case, he can, how much is S1 liable for? 6 lakhs. How much is S2 liable for? 4 lakhs. S1 and S2 will be liable for 6 lakhs and 4 lakhs. I hope this is clear to everyone. Yes. Apart from this, if let us say S2 says my maximum liability will be only 3 lakh. In that case, 7 lakhs and 3 lakhs. Please be careful in this calculation. People make mistakes. If you remember, we had discussed different amounts, maximum liability. That is not the ratio. That is just the maximum amount that I am liable for. Right? So, surety is liable to get contribution from the co-sureties to the maximum limit fixed by the surety and equally to their respective obligation permits. Okay? We are done with the guarantee. Moving forward to contract of bailment. What is a contract of bailment? Now, as I always tell you, bail, jail, no connection. What exactly is bailment? I have given you the possession of the goods for a purpose. And once the purpose is attained, you have to dispose of or return the goods back. Best example, you place an order with Amazon. Amazon does not personally deliver. They use Blue Card services. The contract between Amazon and Blue Dart is what? It's contract of bailment. The person who gives the goods is the bailer. The person to whom the goods are given is the bailee. So, what is a contract of bailment? There is a contract, whether express or implied. Amazon and Blue Dart, it's express. Implied. Finder of the goods. It's an implied contract that you'll trace the owner and return the goods back to him. The goods must be delivered. It must be completed by delivery. And the delivery can be actual, symbolic, or constructive. Actual, I physically give you the goods. Symbolic, handing over the keys. Constructive, there is no physical movement of the goods. The goods are where they are. Just by acknowledging I have completed the delivery. The goods are delivered for some specific purpose. And when I say delivered, there must be a transfer of possession and not mere custody. That means what? Let's say valet parking, you give your keys also to the parking, right? To the hotel people. So you have given them the possession. What is possession? The right to access the goods. Right? What is possession? The right to access the goods. The right to access the goods at any given point of time. Custody is, let's say you park it on the road. The keys are with you. So they just have the custody, not the possession. They cannot access the goods at any given point of time. And last, once the purpose is attained, you cannot keep the goods. You must either return the goods back or dispose of the goods in the manner specified. We have two types of bailment, gratuitous or non-gratuitous. Gratuitous means out of gratitude. That means there is no consideration. When there is no consideration, it can only be for the benefit of the bailer or the benefit of the bailee, cannot be for the benefit of both. So if it's for the benefit of the bailer or the benefit of the bailee. But when we say non-gratuitous, that is for consideration. And if it is for consideration, it is always for the benefit of both the parties. Now, what are the duties of the bailer? Also remember, the duties of the bailer is nothing but also the rights of the bailee to disclose all the known facts. To disclose all the facts, all the faults of the goods. If it is a gratuitous means it's not for money. I am only liable for the known faults. But if it is a non-gratuitous bailment, see guys, I am taking money from you. So whether I know about the faults or not, I am responsible for those faults. So I am liable for the damages whether I am aware or not. So liable for both known and unknown faults. To bear necessary expenses. When I say necessary, it can be ordinary or extraordinary expenses. Right? Always remember, generally, the ordinary expenses are borne by the bailee, whereas the extraordinary expenses are borne by the bailer. Fuel is ordinary. Car breakdown, engine failure, extraordinary. And always remember, so generally the extraordinary expenses are borne by the bailer, though ordinary is borne by the bailee. But when it is a gratuitous bailment for the benefit of the bailer, doesn't matter whether it is a extraordinary expense or whether it is ordinary. All are borne by the what? All are borne by the bailer. Okay? The next one, indemnify bailee. One more thing, if the bailment is a gratuitous bailment, it can be terminated at any time. And because of, so let's say you gave me the goods for 15 days and I'm not paying you anything for it. So it's a gratuitous bailment. But after 2 days, you want to cancel the bailment. Can you cancel it? Yes. A gratuitous bailment can be terminated at any point of time. But if it is, but because you terminated it just after 2 days, if I suffer any loss, can I claim that loss from you? Yes. The next one is defective title. If let's say I stole the goods and I gave it to you on bailment, and because of that you suffer loss, you have a right to claim that loss from me. The last one, whenever the bailment is over, the bailer is bound to accept the goods back from the bailee. He cannot avoid taking back the goods back from the bailee. Now, duties of the bailee is again, as I said, nothing but rights of the bailer. The duty of the bailee includes take reasonable care of the goods. Reasonable care means that care of the goods that an ordinary person would take. So, if I give you my jewelry and you just leave it on your, on your table, it's not reasonable care. But if you keep it in the locker, it's reasonable care. If kept on the table stolen, you are liable. If kept in the locker and stolen, you are not liable. But, so if you have taken reasonable care, you are not liable for any loss to the goods. But there are two cases where even if you have taken reasonable care, you will still be liable for the goods. If I have told you very specifically, please keep it in the bank locker, and instead of keeping it in the bank locker, you just kept it in your locker at home. So because you did not follow my specific instructions, you are liable. Second is when you fail to return the goods back. You fail to return the goods back. So when I say fail to return the goods back, once the bailment is over, you should return the goods back. You fail to return the goods back, in that case, if anything happens to the goods, the bailee is liable to the bailor. Not to mix the bailie's goods, this will be bailor's goods with his own goods. Not to mix the bailor's goods with his own goods. So there are two things here, done with the consent or no consent. If it is done with the consent, it proportionately belongs to both the parties. If it is not done with the consent, then you have to get them separated. Any charges in the separation shall be borne by the bailee. If the goods are not separable and the goods are mixed, then in that case, you have to pay the reasonable price of the goods. And then the next one is, you should not make any unauthorized use of the goods. Let's say I gave you my goods on bailment, you go and pledge it. Right? That's not authorized use of the goods. Let's say I tell you, I give you my car and I tell you, please don't drive on hilly areas, only on plain lands. You go to the hilly areas, unauthorized use of the goods. If anything happens to the goods because of this, can I claim the damages? Yes. If I see you going on hilly areas, can I stop the car and take it there? Yes. So I can terminate claim damages. So see, he is liable to compensate and the contract becomes voidable at the option of the bailor. Okay. I give you my goods on bailment, you go and sell it, you go and pledge it. Can you do that? No, you cannot set up any negative title over the goods. I give you my goods to keep. It is shares of a company. Company announces bonus shares, you get them. Now I tell you, please return my shares. You return the shares, but you don't return the bonus shares. You say, given to me, belong to me. No, it was given on my shares. So if there is any profit to the goods, you should return the profit also. So let's say I have a cow. The cow is about to deliver. I give it to you to keep it in custody because I'm going out. The cow, just because I've used the word custody, ma'am, custody is not bailment. Please don't compare it like that. Just a general word I've used. Cow, by the time I return, the cow has given birth. I say the calf born at my place belongs to me. Can you do that? No, you are supposed to return the calf back. So return any profit or increase in the goods. The next one, right? So we are done with the duties. You get a lot of question from this section. Now, rights of the bailor, apart from what we have discussed, additional rights, right to terminate the bailment. When will you terminate or why will you terminate? If the bailee makes unauthorized use of goods, okay, I can terminate the contract at any time. So if you saw, no, I will on the hilly areas, can I stop and say, I return my car back? Yes, I can. The next one, right to demand back the goods at any time. If it is a gratuitous bailment, okay, if it is a gratuitous bailment, can I ask him to return the goods at any time? Yes. If it is a gratuitous bailment, I can ask him to return the goods at any given point of time. Then, right to file a case against a wrongdoer. This right is available to both bailor and bailee. Let us say A gave his goods to B on bailment. While the goods were with B, C broke the goods, destroyed the goods, damaged the goods, whatever. So this is also a right of B, this is also a right of A. We will do it in rights of bailee also. See here. Okay, I have not written it here. But please remember, this is also a right of the, what do you say, the rights of the bailee also. Can B, because B has the possession of the goods, can B sue C for damages? Yes. Can A sue C for damages? Yes, because he's the owner of the goods. So both A and B have a right of action against the wrongdoer. Then Right to file a suit for enforcement of duties imposed upon a bailee. That means kya? As a bailee, whatever duties you have or whatever obligations you have, if you fail to fulfill that, the bailier can sue you to enforce those duties. Whatever duties we discuss here. You make unauthorized use of the goods. I don't want to cancel, but can I go to the court to ask you to do only the work as is needed? Yes. And the last one, right to claim compensation. This is again from here only. If the bailee makes unauthorized use of the goods, and because of that, anything happens to the goods, can I claim damages also? Yes. Moving forward to rights of the bailee. What are the rights of the bailee? Let us say A and B together run a car renting company. They give it to C. They rent the car to C. C returns it back to A. Is it valid? Yes. One of the joint bailers, valid. Now, let's say A had stolen goods and he gave it to B on bailment. That means they are stolen goods. That means B has no rights. A has no rights over the goods. Yes. Let us say the police comes and claims the goods back from B. A gave stolen goods to B. Police comes and claims the goods from B. Can we say because of A, B is suffering damage? Yes. Can he ask for compensation for that damage? Yes. Then right to compensation. This is basically for the faults in the goods. If we have already discussed this here, if you remember, faults of the goods. If it is a non-gratuitous bailment for any known fault or unknown fault, can he claim damages? Yes. If it is a gratuitous bailment, he can only claim damages for the known fault. Then the next one is right to claim necessary expenses. If you remember, this is again from duties of the bailer. If you remember, if he has incurred extraordinary expenses is to be borne, right? Is to be borne by the bailer, right? Extraordinary expenses. Let's say I repair your car. The engine broke down, I got the car repaired. Can I claim that engine breakdown repairing expenses? Yes. I cannot claim oil car because that's mine. Now, if it is a gratuitous bailment for the benefit of the bailer, then if you remember, I told you, you can recover both ordinary and extraordinary expenses. See, if it is a gratuitous bailment for the benefit of the bailer, he will get both ordinary and extraordinary expenses, right? Right to apply to the court to decide title. That means what? Let us say A gave the goods to B, but C is claiming the goods back from B, right? B is like, he is not even the owner. Why are you claiming? C is like, no, I am the owner. Can B go to the court and sue C to decide actually C has the ownership or not? Yes, he can file a case against C to stop the delivery of the goods to C. The last one, right of lien in case he is not paid. We have general lien and particular lien and general lien. And this is a general lien. Particular lien is for the charges of the services rendered, and for that you can keep the goods for that part of the goods for which you have not paid the money. So if you have got half the money, you can only retain that part of the goods for which you have not been paid. But when it is bankers, warfingers, factors, auditors, that is CA, they can exercise a lien over the general account balance. Like bankers, if you have 2 FD, loan on one, can they stop the other FD also? Yes. Unless you repay the loan, they can stop you from encashing any FD. So with this, we are done. I don't know why I have not written finder of the goods. So let's talk about the finder of the goods. A lost his gold chain, B found the gold chain. So what are the duties of so B found it, finder. He becomes the bailee of the goods and has the same rights as a bailee and the same duties as a bailee. Duty to take care of the goods, trace the owner, return the goods back to him, not to mix the goods with his own goods, not to make unauthorized use of the goods, all that. Let's talk about rights. Will he have a right of reward? Well, reward, he will have a right, but only if announced. So let's say I lost my mobile and I say anyone who finds will get a 10,000 rupees for this. You have a right. But if I'm not announced, this is your phone, I'm like, yeah. Give me money, I give you phone. No, you cannot. If the reward is announced, can you claim it? Yes. Can you even sue for the reward? Yes. Can you exercise a lien over the goods for the reward? That is, retain the goods for the reward? Yes. The second, can you recover the expenses that you have incurred for the goods? Tracing the owner, keeping the goods, taking care of the goods, whatever expenses? Yes. If you are not paid the expenses, can you exercise a lien for those expenses? Yes. Can you sue for those expenses? No. Why you cannot sue? Because that was your choice. You exercise you expend the money. You cannot exercise you can exercise a lien, but you cannot sue. Right? Can you also sell the goods? Yes, if the goods are perishable or the owner is not found, and the owner is found and the expenses are 2/3 or more of the value of the goods. In that case, you can even sell the goods, right? In that case, you can even sell the goods. Now, termination of bailment, when the time, if it is for a period of time and the time is over, or if it is for a purpose is over, parties are over. Unauthorized use of the goods, we saw, if you remember, can be terminated anytime, or if the subject matter is over. Like I gave you for a pet and the pet is no more. Okay, right? With this, we are done with bailment. Moving forward to the next one. The next one, contract of pledge. So, if you remember, when we were doing guarantee, we had discussed this example where D had given a 8 lakh ka value of jewelry to C as a security. This is pledge. When you give your goods as a security for a loan. Now, when we talk about contract of pledge, it's bailment of goods. So, let us say D gave his jewelry as a security for a loan of 10 lakh. So, who is giving the goods? D is giving the goods. So, D is the pawner or the bailer. One second. And C is the pawnee or bailee. The person who gets the goods is the bailee or the pawnee. So if I say rights of the pawner, same as bailer, rights of the bailer. If I say rights of the bailee, same as rights of the pawnee, same as rights of bailee, and so on. But there are a few things that we have additional here, which we will do. What are the essentials of bailment? Now, when we talk about what are the essentials of pledge, bailment could be for variety of reasons. Pledge is only for a loan. So this is always given as a loan or for the performance of the contract. Let's say what is the surety? You will construct my house. You give a gold bar as a surety. So as a security. So this is what? This is also pledge. So it is given as a security for the payment or performance of the contract. The subject matter again will always be goods. Please understand, pledge and bailment can never be for immovable goods. Goods pledge should be in existence and there must be a delivery of the goods. That means what? When I pawn my gold chain, the gold chain does not stay with me. It will go to the pawnee. Right? With this, we are done with this contract of pledge. One thing I would want to discuss here. What are the rights of the pawner and the rights of the pawnee? Rights of the pawner, when he pays off, he has a right to get back the property. If he has paid off, he has a right to get the property. Even if he makes a delayed payment, he has a right to property. And what are the rights of the pawnee? First and foremost, the rights of the pawnee is he can exercise a lien over the goods, not just for the principal or the interest. He can also exercise a lien for ordinary expenses. Can he exercise a lien for extraordinary expenses? No, never. Can he sue for extraordinary expenses? Yes. He cannot retain the goods for extraordinary expenses, but he can sue for extraordinary expenses. Then retain for subsequent advances. That means what? That let us say I have given a loan, taken a security. I give you further loan. The first loan security was given. For the second loan, no security was given. But that first security, I can retain it even for the second loan. So if I have given you multiple loans and I have a security, I can keep the security for all of these subsequent loans also. And the last one, write if pawner makes a default. That means what? If the pawner makes a default, he has a right to sell the goods. Okay. Now the last one, contract of agency. Q facet per alium facet per se. It means what? He who acts through another does the act himself. He who acts through another does the act himself. And that is why we say principal is liable for the acts of the agent. So the person who does the work is the agent. The person for whom the work is done is the principal. Who can be an agent? Anyone, even if it's a person of who's a minor can be an agent, because minor cannot be liable, but he can hold others liable. But when it comes to principal, only a person who has competency to contract can be a principal. And in fact, if the principal is a minor, then in that case, agent is personally liable. In that case, agent is personally liable. Okay? Now, the moving forward, consideration. Now, it's no, I obviously agent would want a consideration, but let's say if I have a contract where I don't pay any consideration to the agent, the contract of agency is still valid. How is agency created? It can be express, implied, or by ratification. Express is by words, oral or written. Finish. Nothing to understand. What is by estoppel or holding out? You are not my agent, but I represent other people that you are my agent. And you keep quiet. Then in that case, if you contract in my name, who will be liable? I will be liable. What is agency by necessity? I have given you authority, but there is an emergency, and to protect my interest, you act outside your authority. Or I have entrusted my property with you, and to save my property, you do an act which is not even your authority. In both of these cases, it is agency by necessity. Like for example, you are carrying my goods, perishable goods, they are getting destroyed. You are not in a position to communicate with me. Can you sell off them? Yes. But there should be a real necessity. You should not be able to communicate, and you should have acted as a man of ordinary prudence. What is by ratification? Two cases. Ratification when you are acting outside your authority, or you are not even my agent, but you are acting as my agent. When you act outside my authority, I am liable for the part authorized. I am not liable for the outside part. But if I accept the outside part, the authority part, I am liable. Agent. Another is when you are acting as an agent for me, even though you are not my agent. I can reject the act, I can accept. This is pretended agent and pretended principal. If I accept your act, I am liable. Now, when we talk about, we have already discussed all of this agency by ratification may be express or implied, must be communicated, must be within a reasonable time. Only whole contract must be ratified. Ratification must not put the third party at a loss. Ratification can be done only after knowledge of material facts. Only lawful acts can be ratified. We have already done agency by necessity. Everything we have done. Extent of agent's authority. First and foremost, agent can bind only if he acts within his authority. That means if he does the act within his authority, he can bind the principal. For carrying the business, he can do any lawful act, and any lawful act that he does to carry the business shall be binding on the principal. Right? If the act is done in the usual course and as per the custom, in that case, he will be liable. And acts in emergency, we have already discussed in agency by necessity. Sub-agent. Delegatus non potest delegare. What it means is, what has been delegated cannot be delegated again. P appoints A as an agent, A appoints SA as an agent. So SA is the agent of A and he acts under the authority of A. So he is the sub-agent of B. If you cannot appoint a sub-agent, and if you do, the agent is liable. But if the agreement says, okay, or if there is an emergency, or the business is like that where we always delegate the work to a sub-agent, then you can appoint a sub-agent, and if he is properly appointed, then the principal will be liable to the third party. Right? But the principal can recover it from the agent. Let's say, for example, I ask you to deliver my goods and you say, ma'am, I have hurt myself. Can I ask someone else to deliver? I say, okay. He is drunk and he drives. Bumps into someone else's car. To that person whose car was destroyed, I am liable. But can I recover it from you? Yes. So the agent is responsible to the principal for the acts of the sub-agent. To the principal, the sub-agent is not directly liable. Because he is the agent of the agent, he is only liable to the agent. He is not directly liable. So he is not liable to the principal. He is only liable to the agent for his acts, right? The next one is substituted agent. Now please understand, substituted agent, A appoints SA as an agent to work under P. P asks A to appoint someone to do their work. SA is not working under the authority of A. He is working under the authority of P. This is a substituted agent, appointed by the agent under the authority of the principal. Here it was appointed by the agent under the authority of the agent. Here it is appointed by the agent under the authority of the principal. Obviously, for the acts of the substituted agent, who is liable? He is liable because he is his agent. But if A was negligent in appointing substituted agent, he just appointed random anyone with it without making a check also, then obviously who will be liable? Then A will be liable. Then A will be liable. Now, duties and obligations of an agent. He must conduct the business as per the directions of the principal. For example, principal says, we don't keep liquid money, invest the money. If he says that, agent should do that. If he does not, he is liable to the principal. Communicate with the principal. If while doing the business, if he is not able to take decisions, he should communicate with the principal. Avoid conflict of interest. That means he should look into the gain of the principal and not into the personal gain. His motive should be to work for the gain of the principal, not look for what profits I can make. Not to make secret profits. What do I mean by this? Let us say P asks A to sell his land for 10 lakh. A sells it to S for 12 lakhs. Pockets 2 lakhs, gives 10 lakh. This is secret profits. Anything he earns over the remuneration, that is known as what? Secret profit. Okay. Remit sums. If he has received any money on behalf of the principal, he should give the money to the principal. And while he is doing business, he should exercise proper care. What are the rights of an agent? Retain out of sums received on principal's accounts. So what sums he can retain? If he has paid any advance to the principal, can he retain? Yes. Whatever remuneration he is supposed to get, can he retain? Yes. For the purpose of agency, if he has incurred any expenses, can he retain that also? Yes, he can. He has a right to claim remuneration for his work. He can exercise a lien on principal's property. This is for remuneration plus also for any expenses or disbursements. That means any other money that he is supposed to recover from the principal. He can exercise a lien for all. Right of indemnification for any lawful acts. That means what? If let's say you tell me, ma'am, please sell my goods, and I make a contract to sell, but you never deliver the goods. I am liable for damages and I claim it from you. Yes. Trusting you, I made this contract. I can claim it from you. Let us say you gave me the stolen goods to sell. I sold. The other person now claims damages from me. Can I claim from you? Yes. But let us say you tell me, please recover my money. I go and hit that person. Can I recover it? No. Or let us say you tell me, go and hit that person. I hit. He sues me. Can I recover anything from you? No. Because it is only for lawful acts. Right? Indemnification against acts done in good faith. That is trusting. Look, you gave me stolen goods. I sell it to someone else. Can I recover? If because of that he suffers any damage, he will recover it from me. Can I recover it from you? Yes, because I acted in good faith. Now, principal's authority to third party. Obviously, principal is liable for the acts which are within the scope of his authority. Okay? Where an agent does more than he is authorized to do, only the act within the authority shall be binding on the principal. So, I tell you, buy goods worth 10 lakh. You buy two varieties of goods, one of 10 lakh and another type of goods 2 lakh. I'm liable for this. I'm not liable for this. I tell you, go and buy sheep. You go and buy sheep and goat for 6 lakhs. Now, I have 6 lakh composite. I don't know how much is for sheep, how much is for goat. Here I knew 10 lakh and 2 lakh separate goods. Here I don't know. So, let us say I tell you, go and buy sheep for 10 lakh. You go and buy sheep for 10 lakh and goat for 2 lakh. I know separable. Liable for this, not liable for this. But you go and buy 6 lakh ka sheep and goat. I don't know how much is for what. So, in that case, I am not liable. When the authority is not separable, I am not liable. Now, let us say P asks A to buy goods on his behalf. A goes and buys goods from B. B told A that goods don't belong to him. He already told. But A did not inform P. Is P bound? Yes. Any notice given to the agent acts as a notice to the principal. So, any information or notice obtained by the agent in the course of the business shall between the principal and the third party have the same legal consequence as if it was given to the principal. Right? Now, the next one. P gave a painting to A, telling him that it's a copy. A goes and tells B it's an original work and sells it. So, P has done fraud or A? A has done fraud. Still, can B cancel the contract against P? Yes. So, see here. Misrepresentation of fraud committed by the agent have the same effect as if it was committed by the principal. So, the third party can actually cancel the contract against the principal even though it is not the principal's fault. So, the next one, personal liability of an agent. When the contract is made by the agent for a merchant who resides outside India, that means if it's a foreign principal, or he does not disclose the name of the principal or undisclosed. Undisclosed principal means he does not specify he is acting as an agent. You are an agent, yeah. Who is your principal? That I will not say. It does not disclose the name of the principal. Who will be liable? Agent will be liable. Undisclosed principal, I want to buy your land, whereas you are buying it for someone else. You should say I am buying it for someone else. But no, What you say, I am buying the land. Pretended agent, remember ratification. Is not an agent but acts as an agent. When the agent exceeds his authority, this also we did in ratification. If accepted, not liable. If not accepted, liable. Who is liable? Then agent is liable. If accepted, principal is liable. If not accepted, then agent is personally liable. Okay, non-existence or incompetent. Incompetent principal. Let's say my principal is minor, principal is unsound mind, all of these cases, right? Okay. Rights of the third parties made by an undisclosed agent. That means what? The agent is an undisclosed. That means he does not say he is an agent or he does not specify the name of the principal. The third party will have rights against the agent. The third party will have the same rights against the principal that he would have had against the agent. Then, performance of contract with agent supposed to be principal. That is undisclosed agent. That is, he does not say undisclosed principal. That is, he does not say that I am acting as an agent for another person. That means what? As between third party and agent, a contract was made, right? Now, whatever terms were there in this contract will also be binding on the principal. Will also be binding on the principal. Okay? Now, if I am making a contract with a agent personally liable, right? If I am making a contract with an agent where the agent is personally liable, let's say foreign principal. Let's say foreign principal. Okay? If it's a foreign principal, let's say, then I can sue the agent or the principal, anyone. But if I have made a contract which very clearly specifies I will only sue the principal or I'll only sue the agent, then in the first case, I cannot sue the agent, or in the second case, I cannot sue the principal. Here, where on the belief that the agent only will be held liable, he cannot afterwards hold the agent or the principal liable respectively. That is, if it is specified that only the principal will be held liable, then agent cannot be sued. That is, if it is specified only principal liable, then in that case, agent cannot be sued. Or if it is specified only agent liable, then principal cannot be sued. Okay? Now, termination. Termination means what? Comes to an end. So, renunciation. That means notice, public notice that I am no longer a agent. If it was for a business, business is over. Death of the principal or the agent, unsoundness, insolvency of the principal, or if it was for a time, termination of time. So with this, we are done with special contracts. It's not tough. It's logical, very easy. I hope this video helps you. If it does, please do leave a like and a comment. Thank you so much. Happy learning and stay motivated.